I'm joined today by Matt and Ruth, who are two of our nature-friendly farming champions, and today we're going to be taking a look through their eyes at how farmers today in Scotland are dealing with a whole range of changes in their climate. Now this isn't, just limited to climate change. There are a whole raft of biodiversity changes, nature changes, policy changes, economic changes and social changes. So this is a really good way to sort of kickstart your Go Falkland experience by talking about everything in the round and seeing how these two are dealing with it day to day. So without further ado, please could you both introduce yourself and maybe give the audience a little bit about how you got into farming, your farming journey, and what you're up to at the moment. So we'll go with Ruth first.
Hello everyone, good morning. I am Ruth and I am a new entrant farmer. I accidentally fell into farming about 9 years ago now, when I ended up with a little bit more land than I anticipated when buying a new house. And our local farmer persuaded me that it'd be a fantastic way to mow the lawn by getting a few sheep. And then a few sheep lent to a few more sheep and a few more sheep. And then before I knew it, I'd fallen into this new and strange world of farming. And the further I kind of delved, the more I learnt and knew how kind of food, communities, farming, landscape was all interconnected. And along that journey learning, I soon came to discover that something within that system was really badly broken. And then that's what led me to become, kind of stumble onto regenerative farming. And it was a bit of a light bulb moment, and now I'm quite a passionate ambassador of kind of regenerative farming and how working with nature allows you to kind of work sustainably and profitably and healthily within the environment. So we have a 30-acre farm and 50 acres of grazing, and we currently are certified organic, and we run sheep, pigs, chickens, geese and anything else that kind of falls onto the farm through one way or another. So that's me in a nutshell.
Perfect, thank you Ruth. Next we'll come to you, Matt.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Matt Griffin. I'm farms manager at Nepath Farms, based just out of Peebles. I look after about 2,500 acres. We run about 3,000 sheep, about 200 cows. I grew up in the southwest of England, not from farming background. Got working on a local farm, went up through agricultural college, worked in the north of England, ended up moving to New Zealand and living in New Zealand for about 15 years. And in 2002, under Alan Saviour, I did my holistic management. I was in my early 20s, and although it felt right inside my industry, being beef and lamb New Zealand, the people I was working for, my friends and my family to some extent just thought I was a bit bonkers and it wasn't really the way to go. 10 years later, I was managing a reasonable sized property for overseas owners, had the ability to implement some of the grazing strategies that I was passionate about, and started to see changes in what was quite a brittle environment. 2018, came back to the UK thinking that subsidies were going, Brexit was happening, there'd be great opportunities. Hadn't been in the UK for 10 years, thinking everybody would be thinking about grass, lower input farming a bit more with nature. And I was a bit shocked to find that nothing had really changed. It took me about nearly 2 years to find my present boss. We drove up his drive, saying to my wife, if this guy doesn't get me, we're going back to New Zealand. Took the job, and yeah, we've had 3 years into the fourth year of sort of transition to a regenerative farming system, big compost projects, change of grazing, and quite an interesting and exciting 3 years, and look forward to the future.
Yeah, thank you very much both, and that's probably quite a nice insight to the sort of farmers and croppers that the Nature Friendly Farming Network have. We are completely across the board, new entrants, small holdings, big estates. Everyone is welcome who's trying to make that sort of gradual change towards nature-friendly farming, which brings us nicely onto the first element of farming in a climate of change, and it's a rather obvious one that we are going through a lot of climate and biodiversity changes that are having an increasingly damaging impact on Scotland. So the Climate Change Committee, who I believe are actually bringing out another report this week, but they did find that the Scottish Government's 2030 target on emissions was no longer credible, and it has since been dropped. Equally, 15% of Scottish wildlife has decreased since 1994, and since 1970, Scotland's distribution of flowering plants has decreased by 47%. This is having a big impact on the farming sector, of course. You know, Storm Babette last year was coined the most expensive weather event in Scotland's history due to the loss of things like crop yields. So with that rather perilous backdrop that I've just given you, what climate change impacts have you experienced the most on your farm to date?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first. Yeah.
For us in particular, we've only really been farming in Scotland for a short period of time, but every year it seems to be, wow, this is the wettest winter we've ever had, this is the coldest winter, now we're on to the hottest spring, the driest summer, and these kind of extreme events are getting more and more frequent. So for us it's really hard to kind of plan and predict what's going to happen when, and this impacts kind of our lambing schedule, our grazing schedule, when the grass is going to be growing. And when we can actually harvest things like our hay, which is our winter fodder. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to kind of pre-plan, where a lot of the time we're farming by looking out the window and hoping things are going to be okay. And I think around us we're looking at an environment that's less and less able to cope with these environmental extremities as well. So when we do get extreme rain, we get extreme floods because the soil's so degraded and we're not seeing the water retention that we should be doing. So I think for us, yeah, it's just the unpredictability of what's coming next.
Thank you. And Matt, will come to you.
Yeah, I think I'll probably echo what Ruth's saying. I've been in Peebles coming up to 4 years and heard all those sort of wet winter, dry summer sort of stats. There's a cattle grid, sort of halfway up the farm, and it was full. It wasn't serving its purpose as cattle grid. And I had some young lads in the summer of 21 working for me, and I got them to shovel it out. And I reckon there was about 2 ton of topsoil, and that was in July. By the following January, it filled back up with soil again, and that constant rain, that sort of erosion of soil and a little bit of gravel down a track really highlighted what was happening, and the fact that I'm losing nutrients and we're losing soil, and I knew that we had to change, and this ongoing change in weather was part of that. My boss challenged the previous manager about the soil and said, look, we keep getting these really dry summers where we panic and we have to make decisions. We either buy feed in or we have to sell capital stock, and we get really wet in the winter and we have to make panic decisions there. Do we shove them in the shed and we feed them? And my boss had said to the previous manager, what do we do? What do we do to improve the soil? And the previous manager turned around and said, if you want better soil, you better go and buy another farm. And that obviously was that mindset of the previous manager, and I think that, you know, we have an opportunity to combat this climate thing.
Yeah, definitely. So that nicely brings us on to maybe some of the more hopeful side of this. So Matt, speaking to that, can you tell us about some of the actions that you've put into place on your farm to build resilience to these growing climate change trends, particularly in relation to soil health?
Yeah, so fundamentally, when I came to NEPAF, it was a set stock traditional stratified system, and I realised that there was a massive opportunity sat there in changing the way that we graze. So we've moved to a sort of AMP grazing, a mob grazing system. So we've put a lot of infrastructure in, we've put a lot of fencing in, we've put a couple of new water schemes in to allow us to implement that. So that's allowed us to have short, hard, fast impact and then long rest. We were testing the soil and looking at various things and realising quite quickly that our fungi and bacteria ratios were seriously out of kilter, and that has led us to driving a compost project in the shed of Johnson Sood bioreactors, and we're now growing fungal rich aerobic static sort of compost, and we're into year 3 now, and we're we're taking that compost and applying it as a foliar back to the ground to try and rebalance and rewild that soil to be able to build resilience into the system.
Yeah, and have you seen the positive benefits of that already?
We've had some. I would say that a couple of members of the team early on were quite sceptical of my vision and where I wanted to go, but we've had a couple of light bulb moments that have been quite astounding, really, in fields where we've implemented rest. We've seen. I always try and leave corners and fence bits off, and we use cages and we leave bits all the time. We've got sort of trial plots going on all over, and we can see that in a field where I split in half, I continuously grazed one side and rested one side for 160 days. The root structure was significantly different, and visually and in terms of water infiltration. We've got a trial plot where we've put our sort of compost brew on against NP and K and a seaweed mix. We use the Regen Ag Lab that Gabe Brown uses in the States, and we can see that we've got more organic available nitrogen in our strip that didn't get nitrogen compared to the strip that did. We do a soil health score where they take the soil and they dry it out and they add moisture back in. They measure the respiration from all the microbes, and we can see really positive differences between where we've amended with our compost and where we haven't. So I think we're driving in a positive direction. Yeah, definitely. That's really good to hear about. And then Ruth, you were touching on points about, the danger of these wet winters. Can you tell us about some of the things that you put in place on your farm to better your farm's water health? Yeah, well, our farm is on a valley side, so we have a lot of water running through the farm, and it was fabulously well drained with these fantastic Victorian land drains. But that meant that as soon as anything happened, the water left the farm along with a lot of soil and nutrients, and obviously flooded the village down the stream. But that left us very vulnerable when you get a sudden rise in temperature or a particularly wet, warm, dry spring. So what we've done is we've tried to look at how we retain water on the farm. So we've done this through improving soil health, by managing our grazing, improving biodiversity within the pastures, that allows the soil to kind of absorb more water and retain that water. But also we're looking at agroforestry schemes and planting that helps us again retain that water and funnel it into specific positions in the land where we can hold water for longer. And obviously during really, really wet times, we have this kind of pooling of water, but obviously we're able to manage that on the farm and keep the livestock out so we don't get poaching and things like that. But also throughout the summer, we'll then get a greater variety of kind of bird life and plant life utilising that area. And again, all this retained water is kind of retaining our soil, retaining our nutrients, and preventing flooding downstream. Yeah, definitely. So it is a truly holistic sort of management approach that you need to take to this. And in that sense, have either of you been involved in any initiatives or landscape scale projects that have sought to better either water or soil health? Is there an added benefit to this collaborative approach that you've seen? Do you want to take this one first? Yeah, there's two things there. We've just done with the Tweed Forum, we've just put 8 kilometres of riparian planting in, funded through various entities, and in collaboration with the neighbour. So my vision would be to have the removal of stock out of all of those surface water, and have riparian planting alongside it, but have it joined up across the landscape, so we don't just see these, join it for wildlife corridors, etc. And I forgot my second point, sorry. Not a problem. So we're not necessarily working on a landscape scale to target specific things, but we are part of, there's a Southwest Scotland regenerative farming network where it's a group of different farmers from all sorts of backgrounds who are kind of working towards this holistic regenerative outcome. So there's no set agenda or goals, it's just a group of farmers exchanging knowledge with each other, kind of experimenting and trialling and discussing what's working, what's not working, what we're struggling with, how we can better it. And I think this is really important because for us especially, we're quite a small farm. And when you see our farm on the valley side compared to the sea of either forestry or ryegrass
fields that are kept for the dairy cows, we do stick out like a sore thumb, and we do start to feel a little bit insignificant, like all of our efforts are a tiny little dot in this great big landscape. But when you start connecting with different farmers and working together, you realise that we are small, but we are incredibly mighty. Like, our ideas are infectious, and we were encouraging different people to try different things, and all of a sudden it snowballs and you get this huge movement of people doing wonderful things and dragging everyone else along with them, and really seeing a difference across the landscape. And that's something really quite special and encouraging.
Definitely, it truly is that kind of, the system needs to change for individuals to benefit from it, because if farms surrounding yours are not better in their soil health, then equally their topsoil could run onto your farm and you're left with the same issues. Now, obviously the Scottish Government are aware of these problems, and they have been working to try and act on the vision for agriculture. They recently passed the Agriculture and Rural Communities Bill, which is going to eventually shift payments away from the EU's cap system towards a 4-tiered system of payment. So Matt, you've actually kind of preempted a lot of this, as you alluded to, in the idea of moving away from subsidies and weatherproofing your farm from subsidies. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that came about and why you think that might be beneficial?
Yeah, so early on at the start of my position, I've sort of given 3 or 4 objectives, and sort of the one at the top was to be able to farm without subsidy. The subsidy regime is uncertain, and the scientific debate appears to be creating some extreme policy, as we're seeing in Denmark. And I think there is a risk that policy is driven by confidence in some science certainties that might not be as certain as people think. So we want to be able to farm in a way that responds to what we are seeing on the ground and how the animals are interacting with the environment. And for the owners, it didn't seem to make sense that we were running a business that was reliant on subsidy, where we could redeploy that money somewhere else. So we're looking to still take that subsidy while it's here, and use it to look up to build into sort of enterprise stacking. So we're bringing third parties on to build in within the ethos of what we're doing and generate incomes and opportunity for other people.
Definitely. So in the sort of vein of how subsidies are going to change from 2025, farmers will have to complete 2 baseline activities in the idea of moving towards this whole farm plan. That can be carbon audits, biodiversity audits, soil analysis, the creation of animal health and welfare plans, or integrated pest management plans. Do you think that these will help farmers to start their journey towards nature-friendly farming, or do you think the Scottish Government needs to go further and quicker, especially in terms of conditionality on the payments that they get?
I think it's quite a tough one for me, because obviously we're already on this journey. Our mindset has changed and we can see the benefits already, so we're very pro. This is a great kind of stepping stone to get other people to change their mindset. But for people who haven't even considered working in a different way, this is a big change, this is a big step. So it's almost like the government needs to encourage people to take baby steps, but at the same time I worry that maybe we're setting the baseline a bit too low, and in a couple of years' time we'll be surpassed that. And so maybe we do need to push people a little bit further. Maybe it does need to be a little bit scarier, but then we'll start seeing these kind of drop-down rewards a lot faster. But also I think it's really difficult to kind of pinpoint certain elements like carbon sequestration and things like that, because they're small components in a much larger thing. And I think what we really need to do is start thinking much more holistically rather than in kind of little blocks.
Definitely, and I think, I imagine that is the idea of the whole farm plan, is to look at it at that kind of holistic system level. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
just that I think it just can't be too prescriptive. It can't be too top heavy. I do worry that people are scared about what it means and where it's going. And we need to show people that actually it tends to drive you in a positive direction, financially, socially, and environmentally. And if people can see it working, then they can relate to it. I think we need to show where we're trying to get to. Peter Brick had a great line the other day, and he said, "I'd asked to come here to speak. I needed to be here for 9 o'clock. Nobody told me how to get here." And I think that's what I'm worried about, is that this is where we want to get to, and we're going to have to tell them how to take every single step to get there. And it just doesn't seem to work when we look back at history in subsidy regime.
Yeah, you need some element of flexibility, and the Nature Friendly Farming Network is in some ways trying to fill a void there in the sort of education that we're doing that is up to date with Scottish Government policy, and trying to help farmers and crofters engage with that rapidly changing climate, whether it's environmentally or in terms of policy. So they're the kind of baseline requirements that are going to be used to access Tier 1 payments, which were previously the basic payment scheme. Have either of you considered how any of the measures in the Tier 2 draft list of measures might deliver for soil and water health?
I think reading through these list of measures, I think there's a good breadth of diversity, so people can really find their own niche, what works on their farm. And there is a lot of kind of positive language in there, like it's really focusing on soil health and different elements. And we were saying, I always said that whenever we've been through anything on the farm, stop thinking of the livestock, stop thinking of the grass, start thinking of the soil. And once that's fixed and that's working properly, everything else flows through. And I think there's a great opportunity within there to find your fix, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very much building from your base up, I guess. Yeah. Matt, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me it has to be really simple. When I went to NEPAF, one of the first things I did was water infiltration tests. Now you simply need a steel tube. You need to work out how much water is an inch of water. A simple calculation. You need to knock it in the ground. You need to put the water in, and you need to see how long it takes for an inch of water to penetrate into the soil. It is the most simplistic, eye-opening thing you can do on your farm. I don't know why everybody doesn't do it. I can take my children and show them it's 2 hours here in the field, lift it up, step over the fence, put it in the hedge, and it's gone in 30 seconds. So we know there's an opportunity there. We know that's a simple baseline to put in to see if we can change the way that water's going in, because if the water's not going in, there's a problem. And if there's a problem, it's the soil health, and we need to fix it.
Definitely. So you're both evidently full of bright ideas in regards to these kinds of solutions. Have either of you been involved in the development of policy or these schemes? And on the back of that, do you think anything more could be done by the Scottish Government to ensure that farmers and crofters are at the centre of co-designing policy?
I think we've both been involved with various groups informing, whether it's meetings with different MSPs or through different groups that we're a part of. And I think it's really important. I know I talk a lot on social media about whenever we've engaged with policy, and there is a certain kickback from certain groups that feel like it's not the individual's place to be having these discussions, and we should be leaving it all in the capable hands of the NFU and organisations such as that. But I think that's totally wrong. I think that's not what our politics system is all about. So that's not how we should operate either. I think everyone has a voice and everyone is affected by this policy. So we really you need to find your voice and talk to people. If you believe in something and you want to see, it's everyone's sort of environment, it's everyone's landscape, it's the food we're eating, it's the kind of communities we're living in is affected by this. So I think it's really important that we do engage with our kind of policies. And I think, again, this is where the NFFN really comes into its own. So it's almost like it's got that, it's that hand-holding to help people. You can go online and they tell you how to construct an email to your MP, how to get involved with different groups. And I think it's really important that everyone, now is the opportunity of a lifetime to really get involved and inform this policy that's going to shape our landscape for the next 25, 50 years. And now we're at such a critical point as well with kind of all the nature decline. Now is the time that we really should be active, vocal, discussing things. You're not always going to be right, but you've always got a valid opinion, and it's worth hearing.
Definitely, and I think you've touched on an important point there, that often farmers and crofters just merely don't have the time because they're working 6-7 days a week. So you need organisations like the NFFN to help facilitate their ideas into the sort of policy domain. Yep. Matt, do you have anything to add to that before we...
Not a huge amount. Like Ruth, part of some of the CATIV projects over the last few years, where we've had quite a lot of people across the farm, you know, and trying to explain what we're doing. Not saying that we're right or we're wrong, but just opening up eyes for people. And it's that farmer-led learning is really, really important, and that has to be at the front of where this goes. We have some awesome farmers through Scotland doing some pretty awesome things, championing the industry and you know, ticking all of those boxes socially, environmentally, and financially. And we need to pay them to deliver the message to other farmers, and not pay a third party to come in to manage it and suck all the money out of the system.
It's frequently covered that the farming sector is facing problems in terms of workforce. Like most workforces in Scotland, it's an ageing population. Young people are facing particular barriers to entering farming, you know, things like land access issues. And we have thankfully recently seen an increased focus on mental health within farming, where it maybe hasn't been there in the past. So in regards to that sort of human side to it, how have you both found it personally, moving towards nature-friendly farming and caring for your soil and water health, as well as obviously benefiting the environment? Has it had any maybe slightly more hidden benefits for you as people?
For me, I think when we first started farming, we were learning to farm, and we felt really dumb, but we were fighting every element on the farm. So we were fighting the rain, we were trying to get, our lambing was earlier, we were trying to get lambs fattened quicker. Everything was battling against the elements. And then I describe it as a light bulb moment, but it was much more gradual than that. But it's almost like we developed this relationship with the farm and the land and the seasons, and became aware of the cycles. And as soon as you start working with that, there's like a natural flow that you kind of become a part of, and it just gives you such it's like being in a toxic relationship, being in a healthy relationship. It empowers you. And originally I was a very introverted person when I started farming, and the more I delve into it and the more joy I find within working with nature, the more passionate and expressive I become, and I want to come to events and talk to people about it. And it's made me a passionate advocate. It's almost like I found myself within the soil, which sounds incredibly whimsical, but and my other half would also say that, you know, it's relieved a huge financial burden from our shoulders, which again, even though you might not think it's affecting you, it certainly does on a day-to-day basis. And when you can take joy in finding a new flower rather than worrying about what the bank manager's going to say, it's a much nicer environment to exist in.
Definitely whimsical but worthwhile. So Matt, how about you? How have you found? Because yours has been quite a long sort of journey towards ending up near Peebles. How have you found it personally?
Yeah, I'm very lucky to be doing what I'm doing, and love what I do every day. What scares me is the amount of fear in our industry that drives a an intervention type of farming. So there's always an intervention that is a big cost to the farmer or crofter, and there's an intervention that costs time. And we've got to move away from that intervention, the fear that if you don't give that animal this, there's a real bad consequence coming, like that treadmill type of farming. We've got a massive mental health issue that we need to move away. So we do a lot of root cause training on the farm with the staff, and we really try to take a step back from, we see a symptom and we try and take a step back and see what the cause is, because usually you treat the symptom and you just go on with your day and you haven't actually treated or thought about the cause. And when we farm with nature, we are always looking to nature for the solution. Our inputs costs have dropped significantly, our stocking rates have gone up significantly, and it's all evolved around changing our grass, managing with nature. We can't be green if we're in the red. I mean, I really like that saying. My job is to make money foremost. I have to pay myself, I have to pay my guys on the farm really well, I have to be able to look after the houses that they live in and give them a good environment to work in. So that's number one. And alongside farming with nature, we deliver those other two anyway. We've got really good social engagement now with peoples, and we're doing some great things that interact with telling the story about what we're doing. So we just we're always looking to nature for that solution, and I think it just drives a more profitable regenerative system.
Yeah, and I really like what you've both touched on there, that there is this sort of notion that farming with nature is a bit of a luxury, whereas from your personal experience, you've found that it's actually made you more profitable and have a bit more time, and all those kinds of added benefits to it. So just a final question for each of you before we see if the audience want to pick your brains on anything. So Ruth, as a new entrant farmer, what attracted you to farming, and how do you think we can galvanise people with fresh ideas such as yourself to come into farming?
But I think obviously we accidentally fell into farming, but I was kind of taken aback with how much of every element of our daily lives farming touches on, from the food we eat to the communities we're a part of to the environment we live amongst. And I've never experienced something that is so impactful. I used to be a graphic designer. You think you're changing the world, creating beautiful products for people to use and cherish, but actually what you're doing as a farmer is so much more valuable. And I think the way that we encourage new farmers in is maybe to kind of take a step back and reevaluate what we class as a farmer. I know we've been ridiculed as we're called a hobby farm, we've got novelty sheep, and that we're not technically real farmers because of our scale. And I think that's completely wrong. I think anyone can produce food and make an impact from what they're doing within the communities with like the value of nutritional food. So the idea that you have to be a farmer, you have to rock in to a £1 million farm and have this awesome tractor and all these things, it's just not true. You can have a 1 acre kind of market garden, you are a farmer. And I think subsidy needs to kind of reflect the value in the small businesses and the diverse businesses. It takes a lot of people doing lots of different things that's really going to kind of bolster the industry. So it's not just diversity in the plants and nature that we want diversity within our farmers as well.
Definitely, I think that's a really nice phrase that you raised at the end. And then finally, Matt, what do you think are the benefits of some of the networks that you've talked about, networks like the Nature Friendly Farming Network? There might be people in the audience who are trying to move towards this system of farming but haven't really engaged with it in a social way before. Can you just touch on maybe some of the positives that you found in engaging with networks?
Yeah, I think I've been incredibly fortunate to engage with some fantastic people that have been unbelievably open about their journey, their story, their farm. I've been lucky enough to look at 3 or 4 sets of farm accounts of people doing similar things to me, to give me confidence that you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It has been an up and down kind of journey. There's peaks and troughs, and it's when you're in those troughs that those networks really help support you, and you can fire some questions. And very often there's somebody that's already been through it. You know, whatever you're thinking, somebody's already tackled it, come across that hurdle and got over it. And we're very fortunate in Scotland that we've got some great networks of some great people that are really helping people drive forward as a whole industry.
Definitely. I think that's a really nice point to end on, and we'll open it up to the audience if you have any questions. If you don't want to ask it in this sort of setting, then equally come and find us in the marquee. We'll be around all today and tomorrow. But does anyone have any questions at this point? Yep.
If there's time, I've got one for Matt and one for Ruth. Matt, I just wonder if you could just say a bit more about the soil sampling and the soil bacteria and fungal ratio. I'd just like to know how you were taking the samples, who you were doing it with, and just a few more details about what you found in the results.
Yeah, so when we think about succession from rock to forest, we move from bacteria to fungi, and we want to be about 1-to-1 sat in the middle on grassland. When we were testing our soils, we just didn't have any fungi in our soils, pretty much full stop. There's 3 or 4 places in the UK that will give you a fungi bacteria score. Jamie Jack, who's on the PFLA stand, go and speak to Jamie. Jamie does a day a week for me on the soils and the compost. He knows, he's a real soil geek. He'll help you. And we've been using the Regen Ag Lab in the States. It's reasonably expensive, but a lot of people were watching stuff with Gabe Brown and Carbon Cowboys and, you know, all this amazing stuff that Peter Bick's doing. And very often what people say is, well, that's in America, it'll never happen in Scotland. So I wanted to grab some of that technology from America, bring it over to Scotland, trial it in our environment, and then show Scottish farmers that actually it is relevant. You know, we're still talking about soil health.
So you were heavy on bacteria and low on fungi?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so...
Driven from compaction, you know, overuse of chemicals, tillage, all of those things. When we test things like hedges, we find plenty of fungi. When we test our compost, we find plenty of fungi. And where we've been applying our brews from our compost, we're starting to see that ratio come back to 1-to-1 quite quickly. Yeah.
Just about your soil trials with the seaweed application in your compost in liquid form, I wondered if you'd done anything with biochar soaked in your proprietary solutions, and if that was of interest.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's lots. So I had a guy working for me who was looking after the trial plot, and we ended up just going down so many different rabbit holes because we were having these conversations of people try this brew, try. So we've got a 1 hectare trial plot with 70 different things going on at the moment. We've taken 38,000 plate meter readings. We've done SAP analysis. We've done conventional soil testing. We've done soil testing at different labs. We do lots of digging. We take people out to the trial plot. Generally we don't have any signage in the trial plot, so it doesn't matter whether you've got a group of NFU farmers or a group of NFF farmers that might have slightly different views of what might be going on in the trial plot. Take them out to the trial plot and then just let them go for a wander and tell me or discuss what they see, rather than saying this is the such and such and this, because they, you know, the NFU guys might want the NP and K strip, and you know, so that it's just for me, it's always about trying to convince myself that we're going on in the right direction. And if I have the opportunity to talk to other farmers and share what I'm doing, then great. But it's my guys on the ground that I've got to convince that this is working and this is what we're trying to achieve. And these are the little trial plots that tell us that it is or it isn't. We just feel, or I feel, that I can fast track where we want to get to by using compost, making those brews and amending it. It's still early days. We've put it on at different rates across the farm at different areas, and we are seeing a lift quite quickly, but we don't know whether that's going to drop back off. We don't know whether we need to do it annually. every 2 years, once, or you know. So it's still evolving story. Yeah.
And we'll come back to your question for Ruth.
Thanks. I'm just interested in the cultural implications of what you said about being perceived as a hobby farmer. I arrived just after this talk had started, so I think I'm not sure how big your farm is or what livestock you're carrying. Would you mind just telling me?
Yep, it's a 30-acre organic farm, and we also have an additional 50 acres of grazing that we're just tenants on. And we have sheep, pigs, chickens, geese, and a couple of horses. Potentially, maybe a few cows in the future.
And where do you feel you're at with your productivity at the moment? Are you going to increase? Have you improved from where you were?
When we first started farming, we were conventionally farming. So we went in pretty heavy and hard with the numbers, trying to, like, we wanted to be big farmers and we were doing big farming things. And when we first kind of started our regenerative journey, we dropped all of our livestock numbers really down to the absolute minimum. And again, after we gave the soil some rest and we sort of perfected our grazing strategy, and the kind of sward started coming back up to health and the soil's flourishing, then again we just allowed the flock to naturally grow.
And just to be sort of bold about it, I'm wondering if you would mind saying a little bit about exactly what your output is in terms of food you put out there into the system to feed people on your 80 acres.
So we're running around 200 lambs, I'd say, annually, but we sell all of our meat direct, and I think this is really important for us because we're in charge of what we're charging for that lamb. So we are affected massively by the weather. So if we have to buy in hay because we've not had a chance to cut any hay, we have certain costs that are implied with that. So we have this huge mammoth of a spreadsheet where we factor in absolutely every single cost that the farm incurs, from just electricity used to run a freezer for the year, and from that we kind of work out how much we need to make per lamb. But we also work on how we're trying to maximise what we make from each lamb. So we'll get a wool clip from each sheep, and the wool clip alone from how we process the wool will pay for the sheep, so for that lamb's life and for the keeping of the ewe for the next 12 months. And then the meat on top of that is profit. But again, if we have a bad year and the wool's not at the right quality, or shearing doesn't happen at the right time and the wool quality drops, then we also need to factor in that into the price of meat. And that's why we do so much, we sell everything direct, because then we're in control of the price.
Okay, so that's 200 lambs, and you also do geese, pigs and chickens.
Yes.
So what are the output from those enterprises as well?
The geese enterprise is a little bit like stick your finger in the air, because the geese lay their eggs wherever the hell they want to. So it's really tough to grapple. But I'd say our pigs are probably the lowest earner for us. I'd say they're about 20% of the farm income. But they are, having pork and sausage and bacon is like the crack that gets everyone through the farm gate, and then we throw lambs at them, and then I think again the eggs is just we have glamping, and we run self-catering accommodation, so the chickens and the eggs and the breakfast packs are sort of add-ons that we sell to our captive audience there. So I think that I'd say the chickens would equate to about 10% of the overall farm profit, so 70% is coming from the sheep.
Truly coined the phrase farm gate drug there.
Yeah. Yeah.